Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. And I'm your co-host, Ray Russell, once again along for the fun ride that is the Wrestling Stoop. As this week, we're going to go back and look at Bob's return from the Amarillo territory back to the state of Florida. Look at some of the talent maybe he got in the ring with there in the couple months, closing out the month of December 1971, heading into January 1972. I know Bob has another Ole Anderson story to share, maybe a Ray Candy story or two here to kick off this week's episode, and we're going to see where else we go. This week, you never know where Bob's going to take us, and this week, it's kind of wide open. Looking forward to it. I know Bob even wants to say a couple kind words about the recent retirement of Sting. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder that you guys can listen to the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop and sister shows like the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. Also, the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. 3 projects going on right now at Regional Wrestling. It's Georgia 1981, the UWF in 1986, and Memphis in 1985. All going on right now at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to Bob's buddy, Barry Rose, and his partner, Captain Nick Massey, on the Glory Days Grapple Concast. You get all the latest news. Everybody headed to the Glory Days GrappleCon, Orlando, Florida, April the 20th at the fabulous Rosen Center Hotel. Lots of great guest interviews on the Glory Days GrappleCon cast, Jack Victory being the most recent. And hey, how about this? Coming at the beginning of April, it's the Pro Wrestling Academy podcast with the professor of Pro Resu himself, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Be sure to join that program as class is in session each and every week. Dan, gonna school us on the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia podcast network located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And be sure to follow me on social media, guys, for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia podcast network. You can friend Bob on Facebook. Find him there at facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. And you can follow me, Ray Russell, on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And last but most definitely not least, now would be a fantabulous time to become a WrestleCopia patron. Talking about that $5 all-access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of the Grenade, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to many of the podcasts here on WrestleCopia, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. Then from there, it's remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all. You also get digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive watch-along series, covering mini past WWF and WCW events. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime, give it a try for a month. I think you'll like all of the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into supporting the brand to help keep the WrestleCopia podcast network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. And now with all of that out of the way, time to bring the man back onto the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Mr. Bob Roop.
Hey, man, it's good to be with you again, Ray. I look forward to this every week. I got new stuff to tell. All the good memories are just beating on my subconscious trapdoor saying, let me out. Some of our brethren have escaped and have now been aired to the general public. We want to get out there, too.
Absolutely, man. You know, you say you have new things to tell. I have new things to learn, and we have new fun to be had, because each and every week it's like a new exploration for me. I'm deep diving, and I don't even have to do anything. I'm just listening, and that's the best part of it all.
Well, you know, a lot of stuff we talk about is because it's funny, or it was fun, or it's positive. You know, I mean, I have talked negative about some situations, and most of the time, but I was forced to. I was trying to defend my reputation of people who are still, to this day, knocking me for some reason. I haven't done anything to anybody for 30-some years, and people are still pissed off for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's wrestling, man. It's a different world. For all of those people, I say this. We've got a lot of great feedback, Bob. Lots of people are loving the show. They're loving the stories. They're catching you. Hey, Bob teased this, and then we didn't hear about it. We want to hear about it. So we're going to touch on some things at the top of this week's episode. Just thanks to the great listeners out there who are just clamoring for more. But before we get going, because you had briefly mentioned, we talked about you had a couple stories on Ray Candy. It doesn't matter how many you tell this week. I'm happy with whatever you bring to the table with that one. But also, early in the episode last week, the tribute to Ole Anderson, you mentioned a commission story in regards to Ole.
Right.
And I went back, and when I was editing it, I caught that myself, but also I had a few of the listeners catch that, and they were like, what's the commission story? So we'll talk about that too at the top of the show. But I also got a nice little piece of feedback here from one of the listeners, and I wanted to talk about it right here on the air with you, Bob. From a listener by the name of Brian out in the New York area. He said, I love the Chris Colt stories. Bob Roop really humanized him. No agenda. He was just a friend. Your podcast will be way better than anything that Dark Side of the Ring does on him this season. Now, I don't know about that. I'm not trying to downplay Dark Side of the Ring, but I read that and it meant a lot to me because I agree. For everything that you see these people tell about Chris Colt, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it negative, but the stories are, the big outlandish stories about Chris Colt and the things he's done and all that. And those are fun. You tell the Don Fargo stories here. There's nothing wrong with that, but you really did humanize Chris Colt just as another human being. So, and I agreed with that. And I just love that he said that because later this season on Dark Side of the Ring, there is a Chris Colt episode upcoming.
Well, something, what was the name of the
Brian?
Brian, thank you very much. Just very appreciate it. Really appreciate it. About Chris, just a quick thing. I'll refer back to the time we were playing pool, and Chris was, he was obviously gay. He had certain mannerisms, and he didn't hide it. And we're playing pool, and this guy that's about maybe 30, 40 pounds and 6 inches taller than Chris and 30, 40 pounds heavier walked up and jostled him on the way by and stuck a quarter on the table like he was going to be the next player. And he kind of looked at Chris like, hey, you going to do anything about it? So, hey, MFer, I might be gay, but I'll kick your ass.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
I tell you, I like that about Chris because here's the deal. It didn't make him any less effeminate at the way he acted sometimes. But Chris was able to, wrestling was such a blessing for him. He was able to take his identity of being a gay person at a time back then. There was no gay pride parades yet. If there were, they were very sparsely attended.
Yeah.
A lot of people hadn't come out of the closet. So Chris was able to be someone who didn't have to hide, didn't have to act like he was ashamed, didn't have to hide who he was. And how can you not but admire that? I mean, he figured out a way to do it. You being outrageous is part of it. So people are talking about Chris. They're not talking about Chris Cole. Oh, you remember Chris Cole? Oh, yeah, the gay guy. No. You remember Chris Cole? Yeah, the mental case. Yeah, the crazy guy. Yeah, so yeah, he did I admired the guy for, well, I don't know if he did it on purpose or as a byproduct of just his natural behavior, but I had to respect him for it. So anyway, thanks for that comment.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you writing in, Brian, and thanks for the love, and we appreciate you very much. And I know he's sent me messages in the past after he listens to Eat Weekly, so he's definitely a weekly listener of the show, a big fan of Bob Roop. He loves the way you tell stories. He says, I can't remember the other podcast because he listens to several, but he says his girlfriend, who doesn't have anything to do with wrestling, she only listens to 2, and you're one of them. She just loves listening to you. So that's pretty cool.
Well, they're listening to us, Ray. I mean, you're part of this too, and well, thank you. I mean, all our listeners. Without you, it was like I told my students, and when I was substitute teaching and teaching full time. Without you, I wouldn't be here. So you're more important than I am. So, and because of that, my job to protect you and make sure you're safe. So you got to listen to me. And so it's the same thing with our listeners. Without with you out there listening to what we're saying now, we wouldn't be here because, Ray and I, we enjoy each other's conversation, but we can't talk all day. And, he's too busy. He got a big family to take care of, and I need a lot of naps. So
You've done it all, man.
Oh, I'm telling you, man, the comfort, all of you who are young now, you got something to look forward to. There'll be a time in your life when you get to a place where you say, I don't want to go out tonight to the bar or go out and looking for girls or do this or that. Guess what? I've got a night I can go to bed about 5 o'clock and have a hell of a long nap. If I want to sleep all night, I can. And I tell you, you're going to look forward and say that, man, I treasure that. So, yeah, life simplifies itself if you live long enough.
All right, so we're gonna kick off. We're gonna talk a little bit about Ray Candy and then Ole Anderson, and then if we have time, which I'm sure we will, we're gonna jump back into the history of your career. We finished up. You came home, so to speak, back to your homestead in the wrestling world, anyway, of Tampa, Florida. And you left Amarillo, the territory, behind in December of 1971. And we're going to pick that back up where we left off there. And we're going to look at some of the stuff, some of the wrestlers that you came in contact with over the course of December of 71, January of 72. And that's going to set the stage for the next episode when we talk about your epic trip, your infamous trip to Iraq. But we'll save that for the next episode. Right now, we're just going to take a look at some of the guys you came in contact with on your arrival back in the old Florida territory. But right now, before we do that, let's go back a couple episodes ago, the tribute to Black History Month. We covered a lot of the old great African-American stars of the territory era, and even Ron Simmons and Butch Reed. Great story there. Still everybody loving that online. But there was several names that, I'm sure we left off there. They didn't fit in the 2-hour, window. I apologize. And a lot of guys you just didn't have big stories on. But one of the guys you said, you talked to me off air and you were almost embarrassed. You said, how could I have forgotten Ray Candy? And then you proceeded to tell me a story that was just amazing. And you said you had a couple. I don't know if you have a couple you want to share here this week or just that story or whatever you want to do. But I wanted to have at it. For those who don't know, Ray Candy was a big boy. He was a big guy. And you said you enjoyed riding with him and whatnot. Later on, he wore the fatigues as half of the Zambui Express, Kareem Muhammad, and all that good stuff. And I'm going to let you right now, Bob, take the stage and talk a little bit about your memories of Ray Candy.
Well, the reason why I felt so foolish or inept for forgetting them was that unlike Butch Reed and Ron Simmons and Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson and Ernie Ladd, Ray and I spent a week together on the road, including sharing a room for a couple of nights. So I got to know him. He was easy. I knew him. I'd known him. Like, hey, how you doing? I'd been in maybe, a dozen dressing rooms with him over the years. Mm-hmm. But this was a chance where we were in the car together all week, and just me and him. And what a the guy was funny. He was intelligent, good conversation, good sense of humor. We had a great time. Now, I past episode, I talked about being in a car with someone, another big guy, that was the exact opposite of that, where it was just misery. Every day was like the drag. It was just what a pain in the butt. With Ray, it was like every day, it wouldn't have mattered if it was gray skies outside. There was sunshine in the car. So we had this great time. And one of the stories I want to tell us, there was a place that I found on this route, this particular route we were on that week, the towns we were going to. There was a German restaurant that had these great strudel and sauerkraut and sauerbraten, which I'd had in Germany in the past, and I couldn't find any in this country that matched up to what I'd had in Germany. So I stopped in this place earlier by myself. They had exactly what. So we were going to be going by that. So I told Ray, I want to take you to a place to eat. Let me treat. It's like they've got European cuisine and all that. So he was fine. So we go in there. I didn't even look at him. He followed behind me, and the hostess led us to a table, and we sat down. I sat down, and I picked up the menu. I'm looking at it, and I look up, and I'm looking at the menu, and I knew what I was going to see. When I looked over at the top of the menu, Ray's looking at me with this look like, Bob, because what it was this German restaurant was full of white people, and only white people. And when they were all German, or most of them were European and whatever. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing racist about this at all. And because I'd been there before, I knew I could get the people weren't the kind that were going to, I felt the ambiance in there, or the vibrations in there. I knew it was safe. Ray wasn't going to, nobody was going to pay any attention to him. And they didn't. So, and I know that he didn't feel, because he had a little smile on his face. If he had been, if he'd have been pissed, he wouldn't have had a smile. He'd been looking at me like, "You MFer, what are you doing bringing me in here?" And, but, he had a little smile on his face. I looked up, I said, "What? What's the problem?" He said, I don't see my brothers around here, Bob. I said, "No, these people, they owe the food to. Nobody's worried about you or me, man. It's just enjoy yourself." And he could feel it. Nobody was paying any attention to us. The people, nobody sitting around us got up and left or anything. I knew I wouldn't have taken him in there. But it was a rib, because when he followed me in there, I know his nervous system immediately picked up on the fact that there weren't a lot of soul brothers around. He was looking around. But I think if he'd have felt in any way threatened, he might have said, "Hey, Bob, I've got to go back to the car for a minute." But no, he didn't. So anyway, it's only funny. You had to really be there, I guess. The look on his face, so I looked over the top of the menu. I had purposely avoided looking at him or looking into his eyes for about 2 minutes. So when I looked at him, he knew too. He had this smile on his face like, Bob. I said, "Hey, you're going to love the sauerkraut, man. You got to order it." So that was one. And then the other one was that week we went to Saginaw, and then the next night was Grand Rapids. So my parents' home was in between, so we stopped there, and Ray slept in my father had passed away by that time, but his big king-size bed was downstairs, and Ray slept on that, and I slept upstairs. There wasn't another bedroom downstairs, but I came down in the morning to just to check on him, see if he was ready to have breakfast. And what had happened is I had my brother and his wife and 3 kids lived upstairs. And he had a son and 2 daughters. And one of his daughters was 4 years old, a little girl named Christy. Christy was a very curious young lady. And when I brought wrestlers over there, all these kids just went crazy. They loved seeing the guys, and most like having Jake the Snake, for example. A lot of these guys would tease the kids and play with them, and they'd seen them on TV and all that. So it was nice. They were nice to the kids. So anyway, I go back to see how Ray's doing, and the door to the back of the room where he's in, I go to peek around the corner, and when I do, I see my niece. This little 4-year-old blonde niece, Ray's laying in bed with the cover up about to his chest level, and he's asleep. As I look around, Christy is on the far side of the bed from me, and she's raising the blanket. She's raising the blanket like she wants to look and see what's underneath it. I mean, I don't know what she was looking to see, anything specific, but anyway, she's lifting the blanket, and Ray woke up and looked up and saw me, and he felt this motion over there, and he looked over, and he saw my niece lifting the cover up. His left arm moves, he slapped that cover down so fast. I said, "Hey, Ray, I mean,
What were you doing with my little niece?"
Yeah, well, I said, and I started laughing. I said, "Christy, get out of there, honey. Give the man some privacy." But, just for the look on his face.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, man. And we both, he laughed too. He laughed. He said, "Geez, God, Bob," he said, "I forgot where I was. But some places in the country, you'd have been going to get a gun." So,
yeah. Well, you said, imagine if that had been Butch Reed's daughter or some Butch Reed coming around the corner, like you was telling me out there. I said, "Oh my God, thank God it was just you," and you kind of understood what was happening there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it just now, but when you told me the story before, and you might have mentioned it, and I didn't hear you just now, but you also mentioned that Ray Candy liked to sleep in the nude. So maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, that's
Yes.
another fun part of the story when she's lifting. Maybe it's not fun, but it's just funny to imagine.
Well, it could have been worse if he was a real sound sleeper, and I looked around the corner and she'd pulled the covers completely off him, and then he woke up. Oh, that would have been even funnier when I think of it. But I don't know. She might not have appreciated it.
Well, that's
anyway. As funny enough as it was, while we're there, shall we move right on to an Ole story?
Well, I mean, we can. I was just going to comment in regards to that's cool. That's just another guy that you wound up. You saw him 100 times in the locker rooms, and you got to spend a week on the road. You just got to enjoy his company. It's amazing how quickly you can read people, not just you, but just in the wrestling business in general. You can kind of read people you get along with, people maybe not so much. You enjoyed Ray Candy's company. Meanwhile, there's somebody else that may have dumbed themselves out of a ride with you and Ted DiBiase once upon a time. Okay. Now we can move on to the Ole story if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's Ray for that week. Now, we didn't see each other for several years. When I saw him as Kareem Muhammad, a lot of miles had been, we'd both traveled a lot of miles on different roads, but we still had a cordial relationship, and I felt like that week together, I felt like he was a friend because I felt like I could trust him. And that's one of the things that's hard in the wrestling business, is to trust people. So I felt like I could trust him, and I liked him, and he was good company, good fun, tough guy, stand-up man, and cerebral. He was a smart guy. So, it was a pleasure. You have those times. People don't think about it now, and your life goes so fast if you're younger. You don't think about the quality of the time you're going through if you're looking and saying, well, maybe I'm not real happy right now with what I'm doing, but I'm going to be down the road somewhere. Well, at my stage of the game, you get to a point where you say every day is important. So if I have a good day for some extraordinary reason, like last week, for example, I had a substitute driver on the bus, and she had an attendant with her, and both the driver and the attendant were just super people. I was with them for about 5 hours, 3 hours one shift and 2 hours the next. We just had a great time. I mean, it was very, very pleasant. And so I thanked him when I left. I said, this is a day that's really, to me, is a very successful day because I had a great time with you guys, and I feel like you're new friends. And we got to know we're brand new, but that doesn't mean we can't be true friends. And so, and I mean stuff like that. And believe me, I wasn't taking in by anything. They weren't trying to impress me or anything. So they were just being themselves. And so to have a week with Ray, I look back on that's something I can look back on with enjoyment. And he's gone now, but I can talk about it. And, hopefully his family and friends and people who knew him can say, well, that's the way I remember Ray too. He was a good man. So, yeah, it's nice to be able to say that. Now, we were at my parents' house in Okemos, Michigan. The next night we were going to be in Grand Rapids. Now, it wasn't that night, the next night, but it was in Grand Rapids that we got into a problem with the commission. And what happened was that on the night before, we'd been in Saginaw, and Ivan Koloff got brain busted or something, I believe, by Dick Murdoch, and he got carried. He was bleeding. He got carried out of there on a stretcher. I think they called the medics for him or something. They were going to come back, I think, on the next show. And Michigan's a commission town. They have an athletic commission, and so the commission has the doctor come to every show. And they give the wrestlers they don't give them a physical. They take their blood pressure and they look at them and, see if they can walk. And because Koloff had been carried out and was bleeding and everything, when we got to Grand Rapids the next night, the commission doctor had the report from the night before. And he came and told Ole, he said, I can't let Ivan Koloff wrestle because he could have a head injury because he was carried out last night and all that. And he said, well, you got to be kidding me. Every show, every wrestler tells a story. All their stories is always a sellout. But we had a very good house. So Ole said, well, what do you mean he can't wrestle? And the doctor said, well, I can't let him wrestle. Well, Ole looked around. He said, Bob, go tell all the boys to pack up their bag. We're going to have to cancel a show. Then he said to the doctor, he said, I want you to be the one to go out and tell all these people that you're canceling the show. The doctor said, well, I'm not. What do you mean? Okay, you don't have to cancel the show. Ole said, I'm not canceling the show. You are. I told Ole, I said, it was a big house out there. And I told the commissioner, I said, you guys, 10% of this is probably between $2,000 and $3,000, which, apparently you're not going to get it because we have to give everybody's money back. So I turned around to go. The doctor said, well, wait a minute. He said, I'm going to, I left out something. Ole said, yeah, Bob, instead of this doctor going in to check out Koloff just to see what kind of shape he's in, he's just going off on last night's report to go ahead and cancel, make us, have us cancel the show.
Right.
Because, and I had also added that I said, if we have to, you can't substitute for this match. And there's no way to substitute. I think it was a cage match. You can't substitute for it. Whatever it was personal. It was an angle. These guys have been fighting each other for a while. So you can't substitute for that. And if you have to it's like Elvis is there's a main event. Say, Elvis is sick. We brought in Pee Wee Herman to take his place. You're going to kill, it wouldn't matter who you brought in. You're going to kill your town. At least, and maybe not kill it, but going to morally wound it for the next few shows because, you're not giving the people what they paid to come and see. And they've already made the effort by coming out, driving, paying, coming in, finding their seat, sitting down. And now you're going to tell them they're not going to get the show that they've worked this hard to see and have anticipation for. So anyway, when the doctor at the last, he said, wait. He said, wait a minute. He said, I'm going to go and check out Mr. Koloff. I'm sure he'll be able to wrestle. But, I know that doesn't sound very like any big deal. But for me, because of the fact that Ole just really, with no expression whatsoever, when he turned to me and said, Bob, go tell all the boys to pack up their stuff and we're not going to be able to work tonight. And, he acted like that was it. That was the order. He wasn't going to equivocate. By doing that, we talked about psychology, about putting the ball in somebody else's court.
I was just going to say, it sounds like Ole's psychology goes far beyond the ring.
Yeah. He put the ball right back, and not a ball, a shot put, right back in the other guy's court. It's like, okay, you brought me a problem. Now, in one sentence, I made it your problem. And it worked out that way. And I was really impressed with that. Again, that's not a major deal, but I thought it was telling. I worked with a lot of good people. I didn't have many people who were as quick as Ole. There were some who were smart like he was, but not as quick because he just reacted to stuff immediately. He didn't take 5 minutes to think about it. He just immediately reacted.
It's like he knew the exact response for everything.
Yeah. Because Ole was so serious, nobody ribbed him. And there were, guys liked him, but Ole didn't even encourage guys. He wouldn't walk up, hey, how you doing, all that. He didn't go in the dressing room unless he had to talk to somebody. And if I was running a show, so he didn't even tell the guys their finishes. Now, if it was the Road Warriors against somebody and he was there, he might go ahead and do it. Just make sure that they got all the nuances. But one guy that we worked with, that we had on the roster for a while was the Iron Sheik. Cosgrove of Zari had this great sense of humor, and he just loved to screw with Ole. He loved to mess with him. He'd be in the dressing room in front of all the boys, and he'd stand up and he'd pat his big drum, his big stomach, and flex a little bit and say, Ole Anderson, that jabroni, he doesn't dare to take on the Iron Sheik, the champion of Iran, the world champion. He doesn't dare to take on the Iron Sheik because that Ole Anderson, he's sitting right in there with all the boys. And that jabroni, and he's talking into where Ole was going to have to wrestle him in the dressing room. But they weren't going to go on their feet. One of them was going to get down. And Ole always insisted that Cosgrove be the one to get down on the mat, and he start on top of him like in amateur wrestling, it's called the referee's position.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, like amateur style. That's what we're talking about. Pro wrestling, we're talking about amateur wrestling. So Cosgrove would get down there, Ole would go like start like he was going to get down. He'd do something like he'd grab Cosgrove's ear or kick him in the butt or step on his leg or something, or half fall on and say, "Oh, sorry, I tripped." And Cosgrove would roll over. Oh, Ole Anderson, I filthy, you cheat. You, Ole Anderson, you jabroni, you cheat, the cheek. And
oh man, I wish there were camera phones back then.
Oh God, it was hilarious. One time we're in Pennsylvania and we happened to be in the same hotel, motel, checking in, and Cosgrove right before us, and as Ole and I walked out, he was waiting for us, and he said, "Well, how about now, big Ole, you take on the Iron Sheik now out here in the snow? Come on." And so Ole said, "All right." So he went out there, and Cosgrove went in like to grab a leg. Well, Ole had his car keys in his hand. He reached up and dug a big divot in the Cosgrove, top of Cosgrove's head. Cosgrove immediately ceased his attack, reached up and grabbed it. Oh, jabroni, Ole Anderson, you cheat again. So yeah, it was. You had to be there. You know, I can't do a good Cosgrove, but it was. Oh man, I'm telling you, it was hilarious.
Sounds like it, man.
Well, even Ole laughed. You know, he was. Yeah, I'm not saying he didn't have a sense of humor, but it was very dry. And
I hear Ole was more liable to smile when he wasn't the promoter or the booker. Like when he was just one of the boys, maybe we'd see a little more laughter out of Ole in the locker room when he could just relax a little bit.
Well, because of the fact that he was, I don't want the word demanding might be too strong, but he had high expectations, and if you didn't meet him, I mean, say you showed up drunk. You know, drunk, whatever, but you showed up in some way that you weren't ready to do your job. He didn't want to have this nice guy Ole persona out there that he had to revert. So he wasn't unfriendly, but he wasn't friendly. He was kind of matter of fact, like he might be talking to people he just met. And that way, if he had to get down on people, he didn't have to like change character very much. He didn't have to go from being this nice guy to being someone who you know, because a lot of times when that happens, you have a person, and what they do is they say something like, "Well, I didn't want to have to say, you know, to get into this area, you know, but I got to tell you this." Oh, he didn't have to say that crap. All he had to do is say, yeah, he just say, "Hey, what the F are you thinking you're doing? What are you doing, you piece of shit?" So, and I appreciated it about him because most of the time he didn't have to say anything. He was running a good ship. Now, one of the areas that Ole and I disagreed on was Buzz Sawyer. Ole loved Buzz Sawyer, and Buzz was a good talent, and he made a lot of money for Ole. So I don't blame him for liking Buzz. But Buzz was an absolute nightmare on the road.
That's what I hear.
I mean, well, for me, I mean, I didn't care about what he did on his own. There was a guy I talked about having to go in his room and carry him out to the car because he was passed on drugs. That could have been Buzz, but that was
kind of my guess.
That was part of my extraordinary duties. That wasn't my job. Wasn't getting guys to matches. My guys was running the show once they got there. But you know, I being the road agent, I guess it was part of my responsibility as a road agent. But anyway, Ole would give the finishes for Buzz matches. So when I would give Ole Buzz the finish, and Ole wasn't on a tour, I'm the one running the shows, Buzz would always bow his neck. And he'd say, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, that's what Ole wants you to do. It's his finish. He said, well, I'm not going to do it. And so I said, well, go call him. No, I'm not going to call him. So I'd have to go call him. And then he'd tell me, well, have him call me. Tell Buzz I want him to call me. Well, you do that 3 or 4 nights a week, and a lot of times it's the same finish or close to it. What a pain! You talk about a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I one night, because Buzz was a talent, I didn't care for that attitude at all. I mean, what a headache! It was so unnecessary. You talk about a prima donna, but one night I heard somebody called me. We had a night off or an afternoon show or something where. Everybody was in Atlanta, and there was a bar that the boys went to, and there was a guy in there that had been hurt somehow. He had a bad leg, he had a cane. He had a sword in it. He had a sword cane. And Buzz had done something to him, insulted him, called him a gimp or something in the past. And I got a call that this guy was making noise like he was going to make Buzz pay that night. He was just waiting for him to get drunk. And so I was at home. So I had to go down to the bar. I went in there. I saw where the guy was, and he definitely was watching Buzz. And so I had to just sit there and keep an eye on. I mean, he wasn't going to do it. He was going to do it when he came outside at the end of the night. I had to sit there all night. So here I am protecting a guy I don't really care about that much. I mean, it's hard for me to like the guy because he was disrespectful to me too. It's like I could have been like a tape recorder. If I was a tape recorder, he probably would have picked it up and thrown it against the wall. So anyway, yeah, that was one area that I didn't. I said last week about Ole that he wasn't perfect. I thought his judgment about Buzz was flawed. And another example, Ole had a Cadillac, an older Cadillac, maybe 15 years old, that he had lovingly restored and was in pristine, just beautiful paint job. I mean, it looked like a brand new 15-year-old car. It looked brand new. And so Buzz somehow wrecked the car or did something. He didn't have vehicles. Ole sold him the car for very little. And I'm telling you, I rode in the car with Ole a couple of times.
Right.
In 2 weeks, it looked like it'd been in a junkyard for 10 years.
Wow.
It had dents all over it, and full of trash on the inside, and food and garbage and everything. Just looked like a herd of pigs had been driving around in it.
Wow.
So, but that Ole, I never did understand the attraction. Maybe he felt sorry for him, or he saw something of himself, or somebody he knew in there, or maybe a relative. I don't know, but that was one thing that, and Buzz is a good talent. Funny, I'll tell you a funny match. Him and Abdullah the Butcher. It was in the Omni. And good house, not sold out, but good house, probably, I don't know, 3/4 full maybe. And some kind of match, no rules. If they got in the ring, I don't know if they were ever both in the ring at the same time. They fought their way. They didn't go up in the upper deck. I mean, upstairs. You would have had to go outside into the places where you go to get refreshments and go upstairs from that angle to get upstairs. But they went up just about every aisle on the outside, and they were fighting the whole time, chopping meat the whole time, chop, 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 chop. They must have hit it. You talk about me and Okuma. They made me and Okuma look like both of us were double amputees with no arms. With the way those guys chopped meat for like 20 minutes. And neither one of them was going to back up. Neither one of them was going to sell. Neither one of them sold a thing. They just chop, chop, chop. Oh, man. The one thing I did notice, Abby was used to doing that. He didn't look like an athlete, but he was in a lot better shape at the end of that than Buzz. Buzz looked like his lungs were about to come out.
Well, Abby was used to that type of match.
Oh yeah, Abby could chop all day. Yeah, that was another one that after I'm watching this kind of stuff and I'm going, oh my God, what? This is a long time ago. This is we're talking about in the 80s.
That was 83, I think, when Buzz fought Abby.
Yeah. So, the hardcore stuff, I've been reading Mick Foley's books, and again, I recommend them highly. Mick writes some really good stuff, interesting stuff. I've learned the history of WWE and, the other two organizations, too, that Mick worked for. I'm learning some history. That's a byproduct of reading them. I'm trying to learn some history of those so we can talk about them down the line with some kind of insight. But Mick talks about the hardcore stuff, stuff, the barbed wire stuff and garbage cans and, Dempsey dumpsters and, the bump off a 15-foot cage and all that stuff, but that we weren't doing that time yet. Having just a regular cage match back in our day was a big deal. Maybe a bull rope. I don't know. I think maybe a cage would be more, because the cage was could be a weapon.
Yeah. For sure.
Bang them. You had all kinds of metal. You could bang them. And plus, they couldn't get. Now, the thing with a bull rope, you couldn't get away. You're strapped in. Supposedly, you can't get away. Of course, you can. if you actually needed to.
Shh, kayfabe, Bob. You're breaking my heart over here. You're exposing me to things.
Well, no, what I mean is you just break the other guy's arm, and
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay.
Wiggle everything until the hand comes off. Then then you pull the thing up. Nobody would unstrap it. Or you talk. What they should have done is they should have had some kind of way to lock those things and have the key up on the top of the top of a pole on the corner or whatever.
That would have required more expenses. That's not happening.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing I read in Nick's book. These real gimmicky matches with cages and things, and some of the stuff that Nick talked about working on, from what he said, is some of the stuff they set up for these guys to do, like him and the Undertaker to be up on top of this thing.
Yeah,
those things weren't real secure. They weren't like they should have been. Where Andre the Giant could have got up there and jumped up and down, and it would have held up. But they had to be careful about where they walked on the dang thing. When you have $1 million gates, when you do the 93,000 people at the Silverdome, it seems to me like for maybe to hire an engineer to make sure that this apparatus is safe, because your money is in the talent, and Vince McMahon was a very, very smart man. The fact that he wouldn't snap onto that philosophy his own self is mind-boggling to me, for a guy as intelligent as he is. I mean, wouldn't you do it if it was you, Ray? Wouldn't you?
My understanding was they had some sort of a trainer there in regards to they got the guy, he actually worked for WCW first, but he'd been in Hollywood for years, the guy that did a lot of the tricks and stunt coordinator.
Yeah. Stunt coordinator. Yeah, well, that's what they needed. Yeah, that's what they needed. Oh, you pay the guy $10,000 or whatever, so what? They were hiring Mr. T and Muhammad Ali. Imagine what they're paying those guys.
Absolutely.
There
was many reports of the celebrities coming in at some of the WrestleManias that were didn't have to do a damn thing and got paid more than the talent that was out there busting their ass. Yeah, so it's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy how that works, but it's like I could care less if certain people were there, but Vince, in their eyes, it's like, oh, it's getting you mainstream momentum because it's on the news or it's on whatever. So,
but no, you're right. That was the purpose, to cross over into mainstream entertainment, not just be in a niche. Wrestling was in a niche for a long time, just in a small niche. When I was trying to sell my first book, at that time there was no internet, there was no Amazon books, there was no way to, Kindle or anything like that. So I sent it to publishers. I got returns from 3 of them that said that, which was remarkable to get that many people, because you just send it on manuscript. And my understanding is that manuscripts that come in over the weekend, for example, are piled up or outside, not the person who's going to make the decision, but his assistants. It's piled up outside their offices or on the floor in their office, and they might come in. There might be, 10, 15, 20 scripts or, manuscripts waiting for them. And so it's their job to read them, and if they think they're good enough, then they'll pass them on to the main guy who's going to make the decision. So just getting a script read, to me, because they're going to open it up, because I've been a reader my whole life. I open up a book. If the first page doesn't grab me, I close it. And so I'm sure they do the same thing. I wrote the book with that in mind, that the first page would grab them. So when I got 3 responses, the only reason I'm saying that, I got 3 responses, I was thrilled. I was great. But they all said the same thing. We like the book, but our demographics show that wrestling fans don't buy books. So for that reason, we have to turn you down. I've waited, 30 years, 25, for things to change, and they have changed a little bit. Maybe they'll be around too. One thing, books, they last forever. If they have any value, they'll be around. I read Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain wrote that 100 years before I was born. And so, anyway, I used to do this all the time, get way down off track. Where were we? Where should we go to now?
Well, we talked a little about Ray Candy. We talked a little bit about Ole. There was even some fun Buzz Sawyer stuff in there, which I'm always here for. I guess now we can head back if you would like, and it kind of involves Ole as well. You come from Amarillo and you pop back up in the Tampa, Florida territory, December 23rd, 1971. Buddy Fuller and company tell you they don't have anything for you right now, Bob. Then they bring you in and give you the TV belt right out of the gate here. Beating Ole Anderson, of all people, as you return to the Tampa, Florida area. You step in the ring either against or with the likes of guys, familiar faces, Bearcat Wright, the great Malenko's there. You fight Bobby Duncombe a few times here, which is the guy that actually beat you for the Brass Knucks title on your way out. You actually only hold the belt, the TV belt here, for about a month. You drop it, Bobby Shane. I'm assuming I'm just guessing here. Maybe they had you drop it because they knew you were headed somewhere else and they didn't expect you to return. I'm just joking. But but
That's a good one.
Yeah, well, sadly, it could have went that way, maybe.
Oh, it was real close. Yeah. Well, I had to sneak out of the country. Yeah, you better believe it was that way. But I was lucky to get out of there.
Absolutely. We'll have a whole lot more on that next time, guys. By the way. And we'll talk about that at the end of this episode as well. But so you come back, you beat Ole, you drop the TV title to Bobby Shane in January. And along the way, it looks like in at least a few cities, you're working a whole lot with Bobby Duncombe and Dick Murdoch. They seem to be an on-again, off-again team around this time. You have a lot of matches with Dickie. He's even doing a mask gimmick in one of the towns as the Texan. So probably some sort of shenanigans going on there why Murdoch had to work you under the hood. When you return, I presume it looks by the way these results fall, you're still a babyface in Florida.
Yeah. Okay. I looked at the same. I went to that WrestlingStats.com and I looked at the same thing you're referring to because I was looking at what we talked about earlier in the day about that time period. I wanted to see if I had been in any angles with anybody. Mm-hmm. And from what I saw, I wasn't because I didn't come back with the same guy 2 weeks in a row in any town, even in a tag team. I saw some matches, Jack Brisco and myself against Murdoch and Duncombe, or Malenko and myself against somebody, but I didn't ever see us come back to the same town a week later in some kind of with the same people. So I obviously wasn't in any programs or any angles or feuds, the wrestling angles where you create a feud where you're fighting over something. But, I'm looking back, I was thinking about that too, and looking back, my life was in a lot of flux right then because of the fact that I was separated from not just my first wife, but my little boy. And I had a girlfriend that I really cared about who was supporting me emotionally, which I needed very badly. My first marriage just put my emotional level like in a toilet. So anyway, I was having a hard time because I wanted to try to keep my little boy, my son Ryan, who is one of the people I love most in the world. I wanted to keep him close by where I could see him. My other only option was to quit the wrestling business. And, I think about it from time to time, and I thought maybe it would have been, but I couldn't make myself, I couldn't do it. I felt like if I could make some money, I could figure out a way to have both, have him in my life and be able to do something that I was enjoying. And, I was making more money than I would have made at any other kind of business I could get into, even with a college degree. So, and I was doing what I wanted to do with my life. I was traveling. I was getting to go to places and see things. So, but coming back to the time we're talking about, after Amarillo, coming back to Tampa, and the way I came back with, Buddy, them trying to keep me out of there. Now, we should, don't you think it's appropriate? I should apologize to the Funks once again.
I think that should be a running thing we do every week.
Every week.
From
now, we're doing this show 20 years from now. I should still be apologizing. The Dory Sr., Dory Jr., the world champion, and Terry Funk, all three put me over in the middle of the ring. And a week later, I come in and give my notice. Oh, God.
The craziest part is Dory Jr. was the world champion, and he put you over.
Yes.
Anything for Pops's hometown promotion there, And Bob's like, yeah, but I want to go back to the beach. Thanks, guys. Thanks for those 6 months. You kept your word, though, right? You said 6 months. There you go.
Yeah. So. Well, part of it was that in Amarillo, I actually, now you talk about you idiot. All you guys out there, girls who have heard me say something about somebody that you care about and say, well, Bob, what a jerk you are. Well, I'm going to say some things about myself. I've been an idiot in a lot of different ways. One of them was, imagine this, you ladies out there. I had a girlfriend that was with me in Amarillo. I brought my wife out there, too, so I could see my son, even though I was only going to be there 6 months. I brought my wife out there and got an apartment, and I thought I could do that juggling act. You talk about being an idiot. It took about a week before my wife caught on to actually I had a girlfriend. And even though we were separated, what was her, how could she hurt me if she didn't want, if she wanted to hurt me because her feelings were hurt when she found out I had a girlfriend? The way she could hurt me was by not letting me see my little boy,
right,
unless she was there. She had to be there. 1 week, I took her and my son with me in the van, all around the loop for a week. And you talk about a nightmare, because she and I didn't. I mean, we weren't screaming and yelling at each other. It wasn't that kind. It just, there was nothing left between us. But my son, it's terrible on him. He was only 4 years old. Mm-hmm. It's terrible on him too. Only reason I'm telling this, it sounds like dirty laundry. There was an emotional payment for that on my part, and wrestling was in the background, quite frankly, and what was important in my life. Trying to, you love your children. Hopefully you do. If you don't, there's something wrong with you. But wrestling, when I look back, I think, why don't I remember more about it? By the way, I found out something else, some stats. I wrestled Okuma 8 times. I only remember twice.
It was quite a few. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's what the stats said. So anyway, when we getting back to Florida from Amarillo, I went back as a babyface because I had left as a babyface. I should have gone in the office. There's all kinds of things. Again, hindsight is always 20/20. I could have gone back in the office and gone to the office and said, why don't you turn me heel? Or I could have, like when I worked with Bobby Shane, if I had been smart, I'd have worked with Bobby Shane. I would have worked towards trying to make that match I had with him personal. Where I always
that was interesting. I don't mean to cut you off, but now that you mentioned that, I was looking in the results. I didn't look too far ahead. I like to just kind of focus on the exact months or whatever we're going to cover, and maybe a little more, just so I kind of have a jump on what's to come. But I noticed Bobby beats you in January. Of course, you eventually leave for Iraq, and I think it's after you come back. You work Bobby in a rematch on TV. He beats you again in some way, shape, or form. But that's pretty much it. There's really it doesn't really transition over to the house shows. It's just a TV deal. You were the champion. He beat you. You got your rematch. He beats you in some way again. And that was pretty much it. And I thought that was unusual because it seems like they could have got something out of that.
Well, part of it was my fault. And also Bobby was running his own program. We talked about that earlier. He had the office hold. And again, there might have been some lingering hard feelings with the Jack Brisco and his valet deal. Mm-hmm. But Bobby was also a businessman, and if I'd have gotten in there and really worked in such a way to where I made him really look good, and I was really pissed off about something he did, or maybe they'd even let me make an interview, or I could even do it in the ring, or I could go by the way by the desk. I'm going to kill that Bobby Shane or whatever. Where Bobby would have looked and said, maybe I can make some money with Bob.
Right.
But with me just going in there and going through I tried to do the best I could, but
right.
I didn't get emotionally involved. And I didn't personalize it at all. And that was stupid. Maybe I could have gotten in a program with Bobby because he was on top. But because I didn't, he wasn't going to go back and say, put me in a program with Roop because, we would make some money, because I doubt if we would have. I don't know what he could have done to me. It was hard to get sympathy on me. I wasn't a white meat baby face, big Olympian. I was kind of chubby.
That's what you were a pretty big dude. I mean, it's hard to get sympathy on a guy like that, especially with your background, like you said, on top of that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this guy's been in the Olympics, so I think he can handle himself even if he loses. I don't.
Well, a guy been in the military, and I think that came out. Yeah, but an Olympian and supposedly a gold medal winner. They kept false booking me or false claiming that. And
Ken Patera was good for that because he won all those golds in the Pan Ams, but he didn't win gold at the Olympics. But when he would come out and cut his promos, he'd wear his Pan Am, his gold medals, and he would talk about, I'm a former Olympian, former Pan Am Games, I'm a gold medalist, and just kind of leave that, vague. Like, I don't know what kind of gold medalist, but it was smart because he truly was a gold medalist. So I thought it was kind of smart of Ken.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I would have been good. Again, the thing is, I still cared about what amateur wrestlers thought because you make false claims. You claim something you didn't win.
Well, all those guys would know you're lying.
They know you're lying, and it takes away everything you did win because you lied about that. So even though you did win a national championship or you were in the Olympics, because you detracted from your character by lying about some claim that you won some. That's why I tried for a year to get them to quit calling me that I won the gold medal, but they just wouldn't do it. So,
there's more money to be made in that story. Plus, it's wrestling. I mean, that's just what they do.
Yeah.
Embellish everything.
Yeah, I'm surprised when I was out there in Texas. I'm surprised Chris Van Eriksen's all of a sudden call himself a gold medal winner. Frankie Kane and I went to see him. Well, we won't go there just yet.
Okay. I'm already taking notes for that one now.
Okay.
Well, I'm trying to see some names here from this time period that you may not even remember because it's like a blink and you'll miss some type thing. But some of these guys, well, for instance, do you remember a guy by the name of Mike Padusis?
Yes.
Okay, because he had been in the business about over 30 years by this point when you came back. And Padusis, there's a funny match with him. I don't know what happened. He goes up for a TV taping up in New York at the tail end of his career. I mean, another several years after this. It's got to be 77, 78. And he works a TV taping. And they have him go over on an enhancement guy so that he can lose the following week to Peter Maivia. And it's kind of, these matches are out there. They're on the Peacock, the WWE network. They're online, I'm sure, as well. And the funny thing is, the match where he's working another enhancement guy, this guy's trying to get a few moves in, and Padusis is having none of it, just shutting down everything. I mean, the match is a train wreck because he's like exposing the business by blocking all these things, not taking these moves. Then he goes out there the next week with Maivia, and if you know what you're looking for, you can see him trying to control that match too. And at one point, you literally see Peter walk over to, I think it was Blassie that was managing him. I could be wrong, but he was going over and he looks over and he just smiles at him like, can you believe this guy is doing this? So, and it's kind of funny. And then like Peter just finishes him real fast with something just to get out of the ring. But it's so funny if you know what you're looking for in that situation. So that's what I know of Padusis outside of reading his career earlier on. I was just curious if you had any interactions with him.
No, I don't. I should have. I don't even know. I can't remember what he looked like. But Peter Maivia is the wrong guy to try to block anything.
Well, that's why I loved when he walked over because it was where the manager stood was where the hard camera was. So literally, you're looking into the camera as you're talking to your manager, and he just looks down and he has this shit-eating grin on his face. Like, are you like you can just read his face? Like, can you believe this asshole's trying this with me? Yeah. And he was kind to him though. I think he gave him a couple headbutts or something and just pinned him instead of continuing the nonsense. But yeah, it was funny.
Peter wasn't gonna, unless if he took over and beat you, he wasn't gonna hurt you to do it unless you started to detract from his stature. You start making him look like doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Your job. Padusis' job was to make him look good. That Peter should leave the ring stronger than when he got in it. Not the same, not where he was. Definitely not less than he was, especially if he wins the match.
Yeah.
If you can make a guy quite a bit stronger than he was, then you're really something. The fact that you lost the match, you talk about a way to be a good loser. You can be a great loser. If you're a great loser, you can make a lot of money. And wrestling business is one way you can make a lot of money by knowing how to lose and making the guy who beats you look like $1 million and keep your heat. That's the added ingredient. That's the hard part. And if the wrestling promotion puts you back on TV every week, which I had that, not every week maybe, but I had that situation in Florida when I was putting people over, like that time I put Thunderbolt over. I think he beat me twice in one night, pinned me twice in one night in Miami. The next week, I knew I was booked on TV the next week.
Did you?
I was going to get a chance to get some heat back.
Did you hear Thunderbolt was announced as going into the WWE Hall of Fame this week?
Great.
Yeah, he was added to the list this year. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, Thunderbolt paid some serious dues all his years in the business. He bowed his neck too, and I give him credit for that because, in a way, I did the same thing. We're talking about that time period. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but I talked about 86 matches from June to May of 72, and then from June to June of the next, 36 matches. Now, there might have been another 20 or so in Europe or in England, but there was certainly, I didn't have over 60 matches for the year, which is like 5 matches a month. For a guy who'd been wrestling full time his first 2 years. Well, part of that, the reason I'm going back to that and referring to that, part of that was because what happened with the situation in Amarillo and then coming back to Florida and having them try to stop me to coming back. And then once I get back, they forget about they're going to stop me. They start using me right away. It kind of helped me. I was getting educated. I was learning not just better in the ring about how to work. I was learning what was going on in the office too. The part about the office. And then when you talk about someone taking 10 years to learn the business, not in a ring. Dick Slater started out knowing ring work within a few months. He was capable in the ring. But as far as learning the office hold, how to protect yourself and how to get yourself over and get yourself booked, we talked about Bobby Shane being a master of that. And then, taking care of your own matches and your own booking when you get in a territory. Mm-hmm. If you can get to that level, well, that's where that part is what takes 10 years. Well, I've only been in the business a couple of years, but I'd learned enough from some of the machinations that were going on between Graham and the Funks and Buddy Fuller and the office in Florida. Some of that stuff that was going on in the Snake Pit. Me wrestling Marks, I was down there a lot more than any other wrestler I can think of would have had to be there because there was no reason for them to be there. But my first year in the business, I was probably down there maybe every other week on an average. So say 25 times in a year to stretch Marks. These poor guys, they conned into saying, well, if you want to get a tryout, come down to Sportatorium. And then they asked me to just, the ones where I put them out and then Graham would sucker punch them. And, by having done that for a year and having that on my conscience too, and having a chance to get out and be around the Funks. And I mean, they were completely different than Graham. And I wasn't around Senior a lot, and I wasn't around the office at all. So, I mean, they weren't asking me to stretch anybody out there. And so, but I was smart enough to the business and the senior side of it, the dark side of the wrestling business. I had caught on to it, and it turned me off. I think that the reason I'm saying that is because I can't think of any other reason that I would have taken so much time off that next year. Now, coming back from Iraq was part of it. What happened to me there was part of it. But even after taking 6 months off, the first part of the next year, I didn't want to work very much either for the first 4 or 5 months of 73. And it's because I didn't like the business. I didn't like the politics and the backstabbing and, guys complaining about saying one thing and knocking the hell out of some guy in the car and then going in the dressing room and kissing his butt. I didn't like that stuff at all. Not that I'm not better than anybody, but I didn't like this stuff. And so I wasn't going to do that. And I found out that sometimes by not being more congenial, if you do have somebody, like I said it with Bobby Shane, by working with Bobby, and then of course if we talked about, he came to me after one of those matches and it said, well, Bob, we don't know each other very well, but I think maybe we could do something. Then I would put on a persona that whatever I thought would be congenial to him or that I would need to, it would seem, So I wouldn't, and I just wasn't ready for that yet. In fact, I never did get where I was very good at it. Yeah, that was part of taking that time off. Where was I? Where were we? Bring me
we
back.
were just discussing, your run here, and then you were talking about why it kind of tapered off there after you came back from Iraq over the next year or so. I don't know. I got a few other names here I could throw at you if you're ready for them.
Okay, let's do that.
Sure. I'll throw a couple at you. If you got anything on either one of them, we can do that. Mike York, not to be confused with Jay York, but Mike York, and then a guy by the name of, well, I guess at this point he was Gary Fulton, but he also wrestled as Charlie Fulton, who was a hell of a hand on the underneath. Yeah, those are two of the names that you seem to work a few times here during this time period. I don't know if you remember either guy or have anything to say about them.
Well, I looked up a picture of Charlie Fulton, and I didn't recognize him. I don't remember. I worked with him a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Mike York, no, I don't remember a lot there.
Okay.
Now, did Mike ever work with Jay?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike and Jay were the tag team partner. The Alaskans?
The Alaskans, Mike and Jay York.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember Mike. Jay was a few inches taller than Mike. I remember Mike. Yeah, Mike came back from. He was out for, I don't know, months. He had been he had made some money. He bought a big diamond ring. He was in an airport. I want to say Detroit. It doesn't matter. He was in an airport,
mm-hmm.
and he found one of those old phones where they had like a telephone booth, where you could step inside and pull the door shut and all that.
Right.
He was in one of those, and he was talking on the phone, and the door opened, and he turned around. There was a guy standing there with a knife, and the guy said, "Give me the ring." And Mike said, F you and all that. The guy stepped forward, and Mike put his arm up, and the guy slashed his arm. And he slashed the underside of his left arm, and he cut it completely wide open. Oh. And Mike immediately pulled the ring off and gave it to the guy. But it took him months to, they sewed everything. They had to sew muscles. They said cut muscles and tendon, everything it touched. So, yeah, that's a bad story, and I'm sorry to share it. But
I had never heard that story.
Well, it's one thing I know about Mike. That's one of the few things I know about him. As far as the matches, no, they had to be good. They had to be okay. Now, Jay, we're not talking about Jay.
No, but we can. While we're here, we're at the Yorks. We can talk about Jay Ray. I know you got some Jay stories.
Yeah, Jay, I was walking, coming back from Hawaii. I was walking on the beach, and I heard this guy say kayfabe, and I looked over, and I didn't recognize him. But he came forward and introduced himself, and so, he was one of the boys. I was glad to see him, and, he's a very nice guy, fun guy. Well, years later, when I got fired by Shire, I went to Van Nuys in a suburb of L.A. Jay had a house there. I went and stayed with him for a couple months, and it was fun to be around. He's actually listed as part of a group called Bonnie and Delaney. At the time, for a couple of years, they were very, very popular top 10 type rock group or music group. And they worked with they had all kinds of people they worked with, Eric Clapton and, all kinds of people at that level. And I was looking, just happened to while I was looking, they had all the list of all these names that they worked with. Well, Jay's name was was at the bottom of that list. And he was a percussionist. He did like bongos or, could be, little castanets and things. He could make those supplementary sounds that a band makes. And so he took me while I was living with him. We went to a recording station a couple times. He was doing something. And one time there was an actor named Clu Gallagher who I'd seen on TV, and he worked as a some kind of policeman. And he was, I don't know what he was doing. He was recording something, singing maybe. But Jay introduced him to me, and the guy was very pleasant and everything. And so, I was a big.
It's amazing. Everything, man, you came in contact with everybody and everything.
Well, I was lucky to, Jay, the reason I'm staying with Jay is because he's interesting. He's funny.
Right.
And
you picked the right ones.
Yeah, we're having a great time. Now, he had a brother. His brother was an actor. And at the time, there was one of the most famous serial killers in the country was called the Hillside Strangler.
Right.
and they've been looking for him for years. One day Jay got a call and it told him to turn on the news, and we turn on the news and there's Walter Cronkite, the father of our country, in a sense. This steady process of a newscaster who's reassured the country for years, all during the new Vietnam War and all that. He's been there reassuring the country, and standing up for what's right. And he comes on the news and he says, and our lead story today, out in Los Angeles, they've caught the hillside strangler. And a picture of Jay's brother popped up behind it.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, it wasn't his brother. He wasn't the strangler. That's why I'm laughing. You just see Jay's face. Yeah. Hey, oh my God. Well, we had to investigate immediately. And what had happened, his brother had some kind of emotional breakdown over a romantic situation and had gotten into some angel dust or something, or meth or whatever, and had made some comments that sounded like he knew something about what was going on. And when they went and talked to him, he wasn't able to exonerate himself with the police, to the point they actually thought he did it. And
wow.
I mean, we knew he didn't. I had met him. I mean, I knew he didn't. There's no way. What was funny, though, not funny, it's interesting.
Oh, definitely. Well, yeah. What are the odds that would be? Yeah.
But they interviewed the neighbors, and they said, neighbors are saying, instead of somebody saying, no, what you got to eat, that's not, absolutely not. There's no way he could be that. I said, oh, I didn't know. Oh, you never would have known it. I would have, and nobody stood up for the poor guy. I just was so put off by that. I thought, oh my God, you people, you have any kind of heart and kindness.
How quickly was that retracted? Do you recall? Was it fairly quick or?
Yeah, within a day or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope there's some kind of news piece out there on YouTube on that. I'd love to try to find that.
Oh, when it came up, oh my God, yeah. Yeah, and that's a nice surprise to find out your brother's being accused of being this horrible. It'd be like Jack the Ripper,
Right, yeah.
So life with Jay was
interesting.
Well, it was interesting, yeah. He had a guy too that you could go to. This guy was a high-level functionary at a college there, and you could go to him, and he would write you scripts and he didn't want money or anything. You could tell him, I have problems relaxing. I think he would give speed too, but they were prescription drugs. They weren't they weren't black market or anything. But he'd write a script, and here's the thing: we say, well, how come this guy's not just an out and out shill and all that? It was because the people that came in there and asked for this, like for me, for example, I was in top physical shape. I was healthy as I could be. Obviously, I wasn't a drug addict of any kind. I looked athletic. I was down about 220 pounds, dressed nicely, well kept, not shaggy or nasty looking or dirty or anything. I was taking care of myself. So the doctor, if I'd come in there and look like, my nose is dripping, I'm twitching and all that, he probably wouldn't have let me in his office. But so I don't want to disparage this guy, but that was one of the benefits because I think he wrote me a script for Quaaludes, and Quaaludes are kind of fun when you really need to relax. Now I never took more than one at a time, so I'm not gonna. I never was a serious druggie, but.
Well, did you ever hear the story of Jay York and the asthma inhaler?
Yes. Oh, go ahead and tell it though.
Oh, yeah. Well, the story, I guess it's been added upon, obviously, over time. I guess it was initially Buddy Rogers' idea, but it was Johnny Valentine who went through with it. And I guess Jay York was out there wrestling, and they take his asthma inhaler, and they spike it, or basically they replace what's in there, with the medicine in there, with lighter fluid.
Yeah.
And Jay comes back and takes a huff of it. And I don't even know what kind of damage that can do. But obviously he wasn't happy, and they say that Jay York carried a gun on him, and that wasn't the only thing. Did you ever hear or did you ever see I have heard rumors that Jay York used to carry hand grenades in his bag.
No, I never saw that. But now, what I heard was what the story I heard. Now, again, telephone, telegram, tell a wrestler. By the time it got to me, it could have been elevated 15 times. I heard he came in with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Johnny that night had one of those Samsonite metal suitcases. A lot of the boys used to wear those.
Yeah.
I don't know if Samsonite's the right name, but the metal ones that are, what the brand name of those?
The Halliburton?
That's it, yeah. And he blew, Johnny had his spear and everything in there, and he just, he blew a big hole in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's the story. He blew a hole through his bag.
Yeah, he told Valentine, he said, next time, he said, I won't be shooting at the bag. And I don't blame him. It probably killed him. It probably almost killed him when he inhaled it.
Yeah, that's what it took his breath away, from my understanding. Like, he couldn't breathe, especially already having asthma on top of it. I mean, just a normal human trying to do that on top of having, the breathing issues to begin with. So I can only imagine. But the story, there's more to that story I've heard in more recent times. And that's that, wrestlers get over things, and they decided they were going to, together, Johnny Valentine and Jay York, they were going to rib the rest of the locker room. And 2 weeks later, Jay York comes back in there with a gun, and he takes Johnny into the shower and shoots the gun off. And everybody thought he killed.
I like it.
Yeah. Everybody thought he killed Johnny, and the rib was on everybody else. They had put that together themselves. So, but I thought that was, I'm just thinking though, like, where are you shooting these poor fucking buildings? They get shotgun holes in the walls. Like, how did that happen? Yeah.
Well, usually there's never anybody official around the dressing room. I don't remember ever seeing a custodian. I mean, while we were there.
I mean, but just think of the sound that would have made, though,
Yeah,
Shoot.
True. Yeah, you're true. Well, that's a good rib. I'm not surprised. Once Jay did the thing with shooting his bag, and Jay was, he had a good nature. He was a smart guy. Once he paid him back, his payback is done. You don't have to hold a grudge. Johnny was one of the big stars in the business, so if they could pull a rib together, yeah, that'd be great.
Right.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that part.
Well, I didn't hear the second part until years later, but that came out a couple of once kayfabe kind of died and wrestlers started telling stories and just kind of shooting the shit, so to speak. It started coming out, and it came out from a couple of the guys from that time period. This is a few years back now, but yeah, I thought I got a kick out of that. I thought that was a hilarious ending to the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, the big story, the main story was just Jay York blowing a hole in his suitcase, so to begin with. And I thought that was crazy enough. But hey, don't screw with me. I bet nobody ever put anything in his inhaler after that anyway.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about back in the day when the business was perceived in a different way. One of the things I've been looking at the dark side of the ring. For background information and stuff for us to talk about, and I need to learn. I need to learn a lot about. I didn't pay attention to wrestling for about 25 years. I didn't watch the WWE.
Right.
All the stuff I saw was always some kind of highlight. I wasn't watching anything on a regular basis because, I lived the life for 20 years. I didn't need to do it anymore. Why do it? Well, anyway, we're talking about what I did in my era, but I'd like to be able to talk about right up to the current day, because I can lend my perspective of something that's happening today about how I think it could be improved or what I maybe learned from it or whatever, and share it, or just make commentary on it from a point of view of an experienced, a guy with some experience. And again, to my 20 years in the business, about 7 of those years, I was watching all the matches every night. So I watched a lot of matches over the time. I got to see just about everything that, now again, we didn't have the hardcore stuff yet. Did I tell the hard way story about Jack Brisco?
I don't remember. I don't recall.
Well, let's see. Maybe it's worth telling. Buddy Fuller I don't know if he had a stock in the Florida promotion, but he and Eddie Graham were close. And Buddy and Lester Welch had points in the office in Florida, and he and Lester were related. So anyway, Buddy Fuller, he was the guy that came up with Eddie Graham to recruit me and Michigan, the first time I ever saw pro wrestlers. So Buddy, he ran Dothan and places like that over there in Alabama. But when he came to the Welch brothers ran it, and Buddy was part of that. But when he came over to Florida, he got the idea of trying to make Jack. Jack was a white meat babyface, white meat with a temper. He wasn't like a victim. He wasn't Little Sisters of the Poor. He was white meat who could fight, but he was clean cut. He was small. He was only about 220 pounds. So Buddy had the idea of making Jack look like a tough guy. So what they wanted to, he had the idea that he was going to get Jack to Hardway, this guy on TV. And they got this poor guy. I've never saw him before. I've never seen him since. And they got out there, and Jack didn't know how to do it. And how do you practice? Who do you practice on? Hey, Bob, come over here. I want to practice doing Hardway. Give me your eyebrow, okay? Oh, yeah, sure, Jack. Yeah. Look, I'm going to go check out something. I'll be back. You just wait for me. But, well, I might as well. There's no sense making a long story. Jack hit the guy 16 times. And the only reason he ever busted him open, the poor guy, by the time he actually busted him open, the poor guy was screaming and he was trying like hell to get away from Jack because Jack, it didn't bust open. So Jack, he's on TV. You got a close-up of him hitting the guy.
Right.
The guy's head, eyebrow is filling the whole screen. And he kept hitting it and hitting it. And by about punch 10, this poor guy's yelling. By about punch 10, the people, the fans, not a big audience in there, maybe 100 people, but they're all screaming, boo, Jack, what are you doing? And
turning heel.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a deal. It wasn't to turn him heel.
Oh, I know. Just
it was making me a mean guy, but not a heel. The only reason it busted was that it's swollen up. The guy's eyebrow or his forehead and his cheek is swollen up to the point when Jack hit it, there's enough fluid already pooled up in there that the skin broke, which was so sickening.
Wow.
I mean, just absolutely nauseating. You talk about one of the really low-class things I ever saw in pro wrestling was that kind of crap and the fact that they would do it on television. What morons.
They'd want something like that on TV, even the hard way, even if it was just a one-shot hard way. But I get that they're trying to they're getting their idea was to get Jack over in that manner. So I get what they were going for. Hey, if we do it on TV, everybody sees it, and then that's all we have to do. But wow, that's crazy that it came to that. Poor guy.
Well, I could have given him a hard way with the blade, even to the point of getting stitches. If they say they paid me $500, I would have done. We could have done that, and no, we'd get it. Jack, whap. All I have to do is duck away from him for a second. By the time I turn around and stand up, you got a big gash there, and the blood's squirting. And then you can pop it 2 or 3 other times. And I would now would I have done that? I would have to help Jack and for the right amount of money, because if you stitches, then you can't tell it ever happened. Say it had for some reason it had to be done, but to get Jack out there to do something he'd never done before with some poor guy he's not like Don Fargo, who's going to put his eyebrow out there and you can hit it 15 times. He's not going to move. He's going to keep that eyebrow up there until you bust it open. But this guy, as soon as Jack hit him once or twice, and he kept hitting him, the guy started to, well, man, I'm getting the crap beat out of me here. I'm sure it hurt him to get punched on the eye. Yeah, that was one of the really, really ignorant moments in sports poor Jack had to go through.
The way you tell it sometimes in regards to Jack Brisco, I can't say he was misused because he was always in the main event. He was a world champion, but it sounds like Eddie Graham and company specifically really abused poor Jack. I mean, just in the booking and the way he was treated. And he I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know that he just went along with everything, but it seems like they kind of took advantage of what Jack would do. And I've heard stories of his payoffs not being as good as some of the other world champions from the time either. So
yeah, that was one of the way I heard it. Now I know, but directly from Jack's mouth, that the big St. Pete show of 63 grand, he was on there with Dory Jr. I think they went an hour. It doesn't matter. That was the main event. I was the one that I wrestled Valentine, and he got $63,000 house. He got paid $250.
$250.
And
Wow.
he called me. He called me about that one. He said, "Oh my God," he was so depressed. He said,
Wow.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" Now, Stomper came up there one time and he got a check for $2,100 for the week, and he tore it up, threw it on Graham's desk, and left. No, I wouldn't have thrown out the check.
Right.
I would have gone and left. I mean, what you want to say? You're going to just go ahead and work for free? No. At least take the money if you're getting screwed, at least take the screwed money and take that with you. But yeah, there were guys. But Jack got his first break there. He was tied to Eddie through business. We all invested in a business together. We all put in $5,000. I was in the business maybe a year into this. It was a bunch of apartment leases that we bought a share of. I think $25,000. Eddie put in 25. Jack and Jerry put in 25. I put in 25. I can't remember who else. Yeah, and after a couple of years, I asked to buy out. I asked to be out of it. Mm-hmm. But Jack was tied up with him. Another thing, Jack and Jerry had stock, and now the money, they had their stock up there in Georgia, but I'm not sure how it got there, and I'm not sure if they didn't have stock in Championship Wrestling for Florida, that somehow got traded or switched or whatever, because they were financially connected to Graham. So it was hard for him to just say F you and take off. Plus, the week he made that $250, he probably made maybe $1,500 for the week. But that was another thing, that when he went out and the other promoters didn't pay him the 10% when he was world champion, that eats away at your self-respect. You're getting screwed, and you go ahead and put up with it, and you just take it. It's one thing if you set a limit and say, okay, I'm going to take it so long, and then I'm going to quit now. And I think basically I've been looking back and wondering why I had such an easy time quitting, even when within a couple 3 years and my savings were spent. I was living paycheck to paycheck or whatever. I didn't care. I didn't mind. I didn't want. I had my boys by then, or at least one of them, and I knew I wasn't going to go back. And I'm happily married. I knew I wasn't going to go back on the road again. And we had that little short thing in '90 with Dusty. And I told you about wanting to quit that one, because even making $75,000 a year and all my expenses, which was big money in 1990, it was big money today, but even bigger then, was, my home life turned to crap.
Yeah.
And what goes to that? You come home, your little boy doesn't recognize you and won't let go of his mother's neck to give you a hug, and your wife's looking at you like, "Oh, nice to see you, jack off. Where you been for the last 3 weeks?"
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden having a big salary and driving around a Cadillac and staying in Hyatt hotel penthouses and all that crap isn't quite as glamorous as it's supposed to be.
As rough as life can be on the road, it can be just as rough at home coming back. Well, honey, I was dealing with the Samoans. I don't give a shit what you were dealing with.
No, and my wife was much happier. She was willing to go out and work to support us. That was our plan. She would support us while I found another trade. And she did. My trade for 7 years was Mr. Mom. I ran some shows and things, and I brought in maybe 5, 6, 8,000 a year, but not much. But she was bringing home most of the bacon, and she didn't mind. I mean, she wanted to. She liked that. She loved our kids and all that, and she was glad to be home with them on the weekend. And she had time for them when she got home at night, but she didn't have to come home to dirty dishes in the sink and laundry that needed to be done and a house that needed to be cleaned. I took care of all that. And the boys were taken care of and fed and happy and glad to see her. So we had a much happier household.
Well, it certainly, it certainly sounds like it. I mean,
I was much happier.
I'm sure once you get out of that bubble, man. But no, I was just thinking some people, I'll say man or woman, are much happier just making that money. You better get back out there on the road, Bob. But in this instance, your wife was happier having a family So that's totally a cool thing too.
Well,
I'm glad that you were able to get out of it, because, a lot of guys can't get out of it. Even if they wanted to, they have nowhere to go. They don't have another trade. They don't want another trade. They can't let it go. And you were able to get out of that bubble, which is, very few and far between.
Well, thank you for saying that. But, I'm sitting here thinking about, as we do this program today, of whether our listener or any listener out there wants to hear us talk about the negative side of pro wrestling, except for this. I'll postulate this reason for maybe talking about it, because we're quoting these programs on Vice called The Dark Side of the Ring. And every case in there is a tragedy of someone who's just like, their wrestling career turned out to be, well, maybe not everyone, but most of them, the wrestling business basically destroyed their life. Jake the Snake, and I was on there with all his problems, and the murder of Bruiser Brody, and all kinds of things that are like really negative. Now, I'm not saying that every wrestler that was in the business would be someone that they could make a show about, but by the same token, I know that when I read Scott Teal's books, his magazines about whatever happened to, I read about over 100 old-time wrestlers from eras before mine, guys that were retired by the time I broke in. Very few of them had a happy retirement, a happy afterlife after the business, because of the fact that they still had to kayfabe, and therefore they couldn't make friends with the regular, couldn't go to the old folks' home and make friends with people because they had to still be the wrestler. And they couldn't say it like it. They couldn't talk about it like it really was.
Right.
Nowadays, you can go ahead and say it. Dave Meltzer was on one of those programs, and he was talking about, Steve Austin was talking about, boy, back in the day when Meltzer's cheat sheet first came out, just to be caught reading it. That was the same thing I was talking about Slater being so nervous in that office of that labor union, and I was trying to get started for the wrestlers to join. Right. Slater was so nervous just being in there that Steve Austin said, yeah, guys were afraid to even read this Meltzer thing that was, basically it was all the results that Meltzer was talking about. Oh, guess what? The match that you saw over in Cincinnati, they had exactly the same
match, right? Yeah.
Where they did it over here.
Yeah.
And that was before cable TV all over the country. And so that was like a big expose. Now I'm going to jump into something that maybe you folks out there might be upset with me, but I've talked about, I want to go back to Ole just for a second. And Ray, you brought this up last week when we talked about Ole, that Ole had problems with Ric Flair for years. And here's why. I said it myself. I saw, as a road agent, I saw Ric Flair and Sting have matches on three times in 1 week. Different talents, of course.
Yeah.
They were the same match, exact. It doesn't matter whether their tights changed. In fact, it'd be better if their tights did change and the background changed. But think about this. You get two of those matches, they're 40 minutes, 45 minutes, exactly the same from start to finish. And you put them up there on two different screens. And you watch them, and you show them, and you have an audience watching of experts or people. And what the debate is pro wrestling real or is it put on? Is it
right?
An act? And when you see two guys do exactly the same thing for 45 minutes, same sequence, same timing, same everything, but where they hitting the mat, on the mat's the same, everything's the same. That's the biggest possible expose that you could make about the wrestling business. Because it's not possible to have that happen by coincidence, is it?
No,
There's no way.
Yeah. It really started with the national stuff too, was Vince would, it wasn't really Vince doing it, but the wrestlers, they would, use the same finish every night. And then they worked Boston and they used that finish, and they worked Philly and they used that finish. And then 1 week you're watching USA and you see the match from Boston, but then the next week somebody screws up in production and they air the match from Philly and you see the same finish. And it's like, wait, there was actually a home video that was released of Hulk Hogan and Harley Race, I think it was. They air back-to-back matches, same exact match in two different cities. Yeah. And it was like, wow, how do you screw this up on the same tape? So, I mean,
And here's the thing. The guys are trained to do different stuff. You don't have to do the same thing. Right. It's fun. Now, here's another thing. You could take two guys who aren't Flair and Sting and teach them how to do those moves, just that.
Right.
Do those moves. They could have that match.
True.
Now, could they have another match? Could you put them with someone else and have either one of them have a match? Could you have to put the two guys together and tell them we'll have another match? They couldn't do it. But if they learn how to do that, like a trapeze act, if they learn how to do that match, well, they could do it too. So what Ole's beef was, he felt that kind of wrestling was performance wrestling. It was strictly a performance, as opposed to having some kind of contest to give their pressure. Now, don't be wrong, the match was great. I was watching a short thing of Flair, Iron Pillman and Stone Cold before he was Stone Cold. Oh, what were they?
Hollywood Blondes.
Hollywood Blondes, and Flair's in the ring against both of them, and Flair's beating the crap out. Flair looked he looked great. I mean, he was in his prime. He was tan and blonde hair. He's punching. Everything looked great. It was fantastic. But if you know that it's not real, that action, now, it's not even commendable anymore to say, well, it's really great the guy can do that. It's actually ridiculous, especially because of the guys that have to sell that stuff. You're like clowns in a circus who are getting hit in the face with pies and all that kind of stuff, because the time is important on that stuff too. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm seriously critical, but I side with Ole in the idea of being able to go out, why can't you change things up a little bit? Just do things different.
Well, I think it's safe to say, I mean, in Flair's era, like when he broke in and as he learned and as he wrestled throughout the 70s and the 80s, even his first one or two world title runs, I think it's more safe to say in that era that Flair obviously was capable of changing things up, but he became complacent and this is my match and this is what I do, right? Whereas Sting probably was led around the ring quite a bit, I would think, in these Flair matches. So it was easy for him to just kind of go through whatever Flair was, calling out there, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
But I know exactly what you're saying, because when Flair worked Steamboat 3 times on TV in '89, they changed it every time. In fact, they even built on what they did in the match prior. Like, okay, I hit this in this match, so this time you're waiting for it, so we're not going to do that. You're going to be ready for it this time, and we're going to counter it, So it kind of built between those. They call it the big trilogy of 1989 between Steamboat and Flair. But I also know what you're saying with Sting, but I think, and again, I've seen a lot of Flair matches, and the backdrop out of the corners coming, the press or the slam off the top ropes coming, the spots, and you can kind of predict them.
Yeah, that's another thing. You would think, well, you'd think that guy, last 17 matches in a row, every time he runs up in that corner to jump off, he gets slammed out there. You'd think he quit doing it. But, I want to make a delineation here. I don't have any criticism for Sting. Flair was leading the show, and I want to congratulate Sting on having a great career. I'm not sure he's done yet, but what he's done so far has been fantastic. And although I had nothing to do with it, I apologize for what happened to him in that dressing room in the beginning of his career. It should never have happened. Murdoch was completely wrong. Dickie was a great worker, but he had a mean streak, and he didn't mind seeing people get hurt. Well, the pro wrestling dressing room is where a guy gets hurt from another wrestler.
Yeah.
That's an abomination. Abomination. It just doesn't happen. That's the one place you are safe. That's the place where all the other wrestlers run out to save a guy who's getting in trouble, who's been in trouble in the ring, and is out there with his life at risk or his health.
Yeah.
You all run out there risking your life to save the guy. And then a guy gets hurt in the dressing room. Absolute. You talk about malpractice. It's the most horrible thing. It's disgusting to hear about. But no, Sting overcame that easily. He what a great career, and it takes a lot of effort.
Well, I was going to say he put a lot of time and effort into, because when they came in to Watts down there, they were just a couple of jacked up guys, muscle bound guys, on some things maybe. And I don't think he's going to deny that. I would hope he wouldn't anyway. And Sting was fairly immobile, really, as far as being muscle-bound when he got there. But after the Warrior left and went to Dallas, Sting became a little bit of a singles guy, tag team with Eddie Gilbert, and he slowly started doing arm drags and drop kicks and this and that. And Sting became what he became, a world champion for many years on top, main eventer. And yeah, just retired, it's wrestling, so you never know. Depends on where that next big paycheck's going to be offered. But for the time being, he's finally, had his retirement match a week or two ago. And kudos to him and his career.
Yes, I've never heard any knocks about it. Of course, I've been out of the loop, and maybe, everybody stubs their toe once in a while, but I've never heard any knocks on the guy. Apparently, he's been a quality guy for his career, and he's kept his private life private, which is the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want people reading about my entire financial background for the last 20 years and how much money I owe and how much in debt I am and how many times I've been sued and all this kind of crap like some of our big stars have had happen to them.
Right.
But, congratulations to Sting for a great career. And again, my critique about the match, again, remember I come from an era that we were kayfabe. Guys like the Mauler and would walk right up to a guy with a knife in his hand and dare the guy to cut him because he had to protect the business. Instead of saying that, it's all fake, don't hurt me and all that, they were willing to risk their life and their
right.
health to back up what they were putting in the ring. And so with all that blood, sweat, and tears that went through all the era of those guys that did that, to just say, oh, well, but things have changed, now it's okay. Those guys are just all wrong, don't worry, heck with them. No. You got to give credit where credit's due, and the guy, when that was the mantra that we're trying to protect this business like it's real, because we didn't have sports entertainment.
Right.
Pro football wasn't considered entertainment. Once things like the Super Bowl started coming along, and college football, all of a sudden there's 20 bowl games every year. It used to be there was a Rose Bowl, and that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe rose and cotton and orange, but that was it. Now there's like 30 of them.
Well, any which way you can make money, Bob. That's all that boils down to.
Well, Los Angeles alone has got like 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 professional sports and amateur sports too that they're all competing against each other. But yeah, boy, we beat around. I don't say beat around the bush, but we've gone back and forth with some stuff today. But yeah, I want to make sure that Sting will accept my congratulations for having a great career. And I always thought that he had a lot of charisma, that in kind of a quiet, strong, silent type.
Mm-hmm.
He protected a lot of, like it's hard to read a book, with the covers. He came across as always came across as very legitimate and very credible. So I got to hand it to him.
Yeah, he was on top in your last year working for WCW. He was the world champion, actually. So, you got to see him a little bit there. Let's see where we're at now, man. We have been all over the place, but some really fun stories, certainly from Buzz Sawyer to Jay York and everything in between here this week. So I guess next episode, you're going to close up shop in Florida for a week or two anyway. How long were you over in Iraq for? How many weeks? What was that?
I was over there about 20 days.
Okay. Well,
but I was only supposed to be there a week.
Well, we'll get into that for sure as part of next week's episode. So you leave in the month of January, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll return in February back to Florida. But in between, you're going to take a trip over to Iraq. And one of the many people you're going to meet over there is a guy by the name of Saddam Hussein. How crazy is that to say?
Well, believe me, I was crazy to go over there. But I didn't know Saddam had not become Saddam yet. Now, he'd already murdered about 100 people that were opposition in the government, people that were in the government when he took over, when his party took over. He also had hung, the year before I went, he had hung a dozen Iraqi citizens of Jewish religion. He called them spies, and he hung them in the town square in Baghdad and invited the public to come watch like it was a fair day or something. And up to 500,000 people came down. They didn't see him get hung, but they left the bodies hanging from lampposts and things for a couple of days. And
Wow.
I'll say up to 1 million people ended up coming. They had to walk. You couldn't drive down there. Yeah, he was already well on his way to, and they were using the wrestling as to promote the government. So we'll get into that next week. I want to say one other short story. We talked on one of our shows about, it was in Amarillo, about wrestling the bear. I was having lunch with a high school classmate buddy of mine. We were in football and wrestling together. We get together every Saturday and have lunch, and he was asking me about if I had heard anything about a guy named Dave Behrman. I thought, I wrestled a bear, but also before I wrestled Victor the Bear, or whatever his name was, I wrestled a guy named Dave Behrman. The only reason that has any interest at all as a story was that my sophomore year in high school, the way you got to go to the state tournament was at the end of the regular season, like the dual meets and everything, they had what's called a regional tournament. And there was 4 of them in the state of Michigan in different parts of the state, some in upper Michigan, some over around Detroit and in the Lansing area. And the top 4 place winners in each weight class at each one of those tournaments would go to state. So you'd have 16 guys in each weight class that would go to the state tournament, and they would have that tournament, they would wrestle off until whoever won. So my sophomore year, I had a very unspectacular record, probably, 50-50, I don't even remember, but I got lucky in the regional tournament, the one to get to go to state. And I had a fairly easy match in the first round. Well, the guy I wrestled in the second round went to a local high school. He was the son of the current, at that time, governor of Michigan, a guy named Soapy Williams. His son was a heavyweight wrestler at a high school in our area, and he was in the regional. And I got very lucky. I'll never forget it. I think it's the only roll. A roll is a move. You amateur wrestlers will know what it is. It's where a guy's got his arm around your waist, you're down on the mat, and you just grab his hand and you roll. And if you do it right, he rolls over on his back and you just turn and you flop on top of him. Well, I managed to do the roll, and I got 2 points for a reversal. And I had him on his back long enough to get 3 points for that. I ended up beating the guy, but there's no way it was expected. I mean, nobody was betting on it. But well, anyway, I ended up taking third, so I got to go to the state tournament. And it's not funny at all, really, but my dad was a professor at Michigan State University, which State University was funded in part, a great part, by the state of Michigan, of which G. Menon Williams is a governor. My dad, he was trying to be amusing, I think, but he said, well, I hope you didn't get me fired. You beat the son of my boss. But at the state tournament, you go, I was 15 years old. I'd been wrestling a couple of years, but I was a big, strong kid, but I was still a kid. So I'm going up and I'm looking to see who I'm going to wrestle in the first round. And this guy, Dave Behrman from Dowagiac. Well, there's another guy looking at that chart too, or the match that I'm looking at. And he's got Dowagiac. He got a wrestling uniform on now with the warm up type, and it's got Dowagiac across the part on the back, and he's a pretty big guy. So I thought that had to be the heavyweight because he was looking at the heavyweight bracket. So I thought he had to be the heavyweight. So when it comes time for my match, I go up to the edge of the ring. My coach comes up with me. Now that was unusual because by this time I would have already had about, say 50 matches for him. And I'd gone in dual meets where you wrestle against another team, and he would normally be at the bench area where we sat or the seats, and he would pat me on the back or whatever and say, okay, go on out. Well, this time he comes up to the edge of the mat with me. I go to walk out to the middle. He's walking out there with me. I'm looking at him going like, where are you going? Why are you coming out here? And I see him looking straight ahead, and I look, and coming out of the other side is this guy. I mean, Frankenstein would have been a little more scary, and Godzilla would have been definitely a lot more scary. But this guy was somewhere in between. He was 6'9", about 300 pounds. The guy had 24-inch upper arms. He was just a monster, and I had not seen him. He never showed up for anybody to look at before this match. And I think my coach assumed that I would see the guy turn around and head for the hills. But no, I wasn't going to do that. But it was pretty scary. This guy was an All-American football player as a senior in high school for the whole country. He was the number one defensive center, middle guard, they called it, in the country. And he had a football scholarship to Michigan State. When they did the Pan American Games tryouts after junior year in high school, he was the alternate. He was the second place. So he was terrific. He just big and strong. He wasn't a really skilled wrestler, but he was this monster, this physical monster. Did I go gulp a couple times? Yeah, but I wasn't going to run from the guy, no. In fact, thank God he wasn't some really aggressive, nasty. I'll tell another wrestling story, amateur story later on, about wrestling a black wrestler whose coach motivated him for his match with me by telling him I'd made a racist comment about him. Wow. That guy came out and tore onto me like he caught me with his mother.
Wow.
So thank God Dave Behrman didn't do that. I think the match was like 3-2 or something like that. But I thought again it was funny that my coach walked me out there just to make sure I didn't take off. And again, one of those surprises. Maybe it's funnier to me than anybody else, but
this is about your memories and your experiences in life, man. I mean, if it's making you laugh, somebody out there is either having a chuckle or they're entertained. I hope. I mean, that's when you can envision things like that. That's well, especially so young. But
how about surprise?
Yeah, that's
Oh, you thought you were wrestling that little guy? No, you're wrestling Godzilla over here.
Yeah, there
well,
you
anyway,
go.
I wanted to share that. I mean, we haven't talked about any amateur days yet.
Right, yeah. Well, it's good to catch something like that at the back end of the episode. Just kind of fill it in and tell another story from throughout your life. And we were all over the place today, and we covered the little. I mean, you came back in December. You're gone by January to go to Iraq. So I'm glad that there was all this other, these other stories we could fill this episode with. Just lots of great names, great memories, and just a fun time again as usual. And now you're off to Iraq, and I have 100 questions for you on that episode, and we're going to really go into some things, though, at the same time next week on the show and talk about your experience going over to Iraq, working against Sheik Adnan El-Kaisi, as he was known here in the United States, Billy White Wolf in the WWF, General Adnan in the WWF later on when he managed Sergeant Slaughter during the whole Gulf War era. So for those who don't know who he was, Sheik Adnan recently passed away, I believe maybe last year. And
he did.
You had some situations.
Khosrow too, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Yeah.
But you had some issues over there, quite a few, to say the least.
Well, yeah.
I'm minimizing that, by the way.
Yeah, he brought me over there to get me killed. Yeah, I had an issue. I had a couple of issues. Yeah, we'll talk about it next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You go over there, and this is crazy. I invite everybody to look this up. And Bob, I don't know if you know this exists, but about 6 months ago, this was uploaded to YouTube. If you look up Bob Roop versus Adnan El-Kaisi, Iraq, there's 30 seconds. It's only 30 seconds of that event, if you want to call it that, because it's just the one match on YouTube. But the crazy part is about 20 of those 30 seconds is just the filming of the crowd. And I mean, it's a sea. I mean, literally just a sea of people as far as you can see there to witness this event. And that alone would have scared, I would have been done. So, that was a scary sight. I'm looking back 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, watching that film footage, and it scares me today. So, it's crazy.
Adnan said it was a 250,000 people, and I believe him.
It was a lot of people.
250. Well, Saddam was the promoter.
Right.
But he had Casey running things, and Casey set up, and he said that 250,000 people came to the matches. So I had two there. I actually in total I had 3 matches there, and they're all packed like that. And so 3 matches, 750,000 people. I was trying to figure out how long it would take even someone like Bruno or Hulk or somebody to sell. Saying they're doing 25,000 people a night. How long it would take them to add up to 750,000 spectators in 3 matches.
Now, to be fair, I don't know how many of them came there to see you, though, Bob. I'm just.
Well,
and I don't know how many of them came there based on their own free will either. I think that was kind of an obligation some of those people felt. But no, I get you. It's insane, and it's a scary sight. I'm not even saying they're all hostile people. I'm just saying that's a scary sight. I mean, it's crazy. So I invite everybody to go check that little clip out on YouTube and just go look at the sea of people I'm referencing. And then there's like 10 seconds, if you want to call it that, of a match. Unfortunately, hopefully there's a little more out there that exists and it'll come to light someday, but that does exist. Boy, it is out there. And I'm looking forward to talking all about it next week.
Boy, I'd love to find more about the match. Yeah, I would. I'd give anything if I'd taped this. So you just never know. You never know. But the guy who wrestled there before me was Andre the Giant. He got beat. Casey beat him 2 straight falls in about a total of about 15 minutes.
Right.
Because Saddam had told him before the match that if Andre hurt him in any way, that he was going to fill Andre full of holes and send him back to France in a box. Knowing that about Andre, a year and a half later, I wrestle there, and Casey has me beat him. And not only beat him, well, we'll save it. That's enough of a teaser. We'll talk about it next week.
Oh yeah, I got some questions for you for sure, and definitely going to look into how everything was set up over there. Looking forward to it. We're definitely going to have some fun talking about that, even if it wasn't fun when it went down. I'm looking forward to it next week, Bob. Appreciate you again this week. Episode 20 in the books. Thank you once again, Bob Roop.
Thank you, Ray. You're the best.
And all right, guys, that'll wrap it up here this week. Thank you, Bob, again so very much for all the great stories here. And a reminder that you guys can friend Bob over at facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell, over on X, formerly Twitter, and Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. Check out all of the wonderful shows as part of the WrestleCopia brand. You can do so by heading over to WrestleCopia.com. And of course, be sure to check out that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many gifts, guys, for just $5, and every penny of it going right back here into the podcast network. So please show your support. Help keep all of the great shows here, like this one, up and running. We greatly appreciate each and every one of the listeners. And we'll be back soon with another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop.